Doesn't that just put your mind at ease? Because it sure as hell does for me. Unbearably pretty animation, the bustling metropolis of Tokyo, a splash of urban greenery, and all this blanketed by the downpour of what, in my opinion, is the most peaceful natural phenomena on Earth. Rain. This collection of vibrant, tranquil scenes you see before you quite perfectly sum up my definition of comfort. They're from an anime known across the internet in clips, edits, and AMVs, and because I could not help myself, here's another one. Ladies and gentlemen, The Garden of Words. Written, directed, and edited by the uber-talented auteur Makoto Shinkai, animated by Comics Wave Films, and featuring music by Daisuke Kashiwa. The Garden of Words is a quaint 46-minute feature highlighting the growing bond between two lonely absentees, who skip school and work to lament in Shinjuku Gyoin National Garden exclusively on rainy mornings. In my time of watching anime, I've never seen anything quite like this. The Garden of Words blends groundbreaking hyper-realistic animation seamlessly with the familiar stylization of anime characters. Visually, the only things that compare are Shinkai's other more popular works like Your Name and Weathering With You, but this still manages to uniquely stand on its own in personality, essence, and artistry. I just can't help but keep revisiting the Garden of Words whenever I'm in dire need of that feeling that can only be given to me by the trees, the trains, the food, and literally everything else that's on display in this masterpiece. This film has an unrivaled ability to romanticize everyday things, coating them with an immensely magic allure. I've no doubt in my mind that this anime will continue to echo in film culture for eternity, because this deserves all the flowers it gets. And I'd like to add a few petals to that pile. I have to start by talking about the main character of this anime. So elegantly animated, such depth of persona, a presence on screen like no other, and their dialogue, pure ASMR. No, not any of them. Rain is the name of the titular character in the Garden of Words, visually, thematically, and narratively carrying this anime on its slippery back. This isn't just your ordinary everyday hand-drawn Rain. No. The team at Comics Wave Films employed a 3D CG particle approach to generate the complex, semi-random motion and optical behavior. And so as not to have the CG Rain seem off from the gorgeous hand-painted backgrounds, it was then composited in 2D plates. All the painterly background art you do see in the film was the result of tirelessly drawing over reference material of Shinjuku, which consisted of thousands of real pictures Shinkai took himself in preparation for storyboarding this feature. This superb background art was then paired with layered CG elements like raindrops, ripples, and wet reflections. Characters were then carefully composited to feel truly rooted in the glistening environments. This is why the water feels tactile and the scene feels alive. The result is animation that looks less like cartoon rain and more like weather you could step into. Oh boy, how I wish that was actually true. Kenichi Tsuchiya was the animation director and was responsible for character design, while Hiroshi Takiguchi was the art director overseeing the background art. And once their respective teams had done their jobs, they would finally hand it over to Makoto Shinkai, who also wore the hat of cinematographer. Using Adobe Photoshop, he would combine the elements and do finishing touches on coloring and the unbelievably dazzling aura of light. Pick any number of frames from any of his features and your jaw will be left on the floor at how meticulously they're lit. For this particular project, a novel coloring method was developed. It involved integrating the coloring for each character with the background, a new innovation of sorts that mimics refraction of light on the skin as seen in nature. This was done by coloring the outline of the character, including the lines drawn for separation of lit and shadowed surfaces, and then incorporating the background color onto the surface. Shinkai hoped this would make the anime stand out from others, and I think we can all agree that this innovation was a resounding success. Throughout, there's there's a lot of purposeful effort put into this anime to incorporate real filmmaking techniques. Blurs, focuses, unsteady cameras, and moving drone shots. Now, you could be a moron and be asking yourself right now, why not just use real footage if you're going through all this effort to emulate reality? Firstly, how dare you? And secondly, Shinkai has a reason for this too. He's always encouraged his background artists to paint what they find beautiful, to focus on what they want the viewer to notice in each scene, to bring unique artistic perspective to environments which the camera may perceive as the same, but will come out entirely different depending on whose hand the pencil is in. The sound design also pairs with the visuals amazingly. It is kinda just as simple as adding crisp foley of pouring rain to most of the scenes. But it's used very effectively. Amongst the mellow score by Daisuke Kashiwa, a lot of this film's audio is populated by either silence or the orchestra of sounds found in the nature of Shinjuku and Shinjuku Gyoen National Garden. The gentle piano of Kashiwa is used mainly in scenes to show the passage of time or to serenade the scenery. But in majority of the characters' intimate conversations and moments, it's just the sweet sounds of rain. And I find that such a genius creative choice. It drowns us in the message that rain is the third wheel. It's what brought them together and what continues to be the reason for their encounters. They look forward to it more than sunny days, even praying for it. This element psychologically has to be one of the main factors to my obsession with this film. It goes hand in hand with my love of lo-fi, shameless plug, both having a healthy heaping of that calming white noise. The score by Kashiwa shouldn't be overlooked either, mainly filled with piano, light strings, and subtle electronic tones. From my ear, I feel it carries a faint sadness behind it, with some tracks imbuing a more hopeful attitude. It accompanies the pace and atmosphere of this film very well. I would like to, however, isolate a particular track, one that has not left my playlist ever since I first watched The Garden of Words years back. The ending song, aptly titled Rain, is originally a track from 1988 by Senri Oe, one Shinkai used to listen to regularly back in his university days. When he started working on this film, it was the first track that came to his mind. Its lyrics capture everyday life with such gentle honesty, exactly the atmosphere he was going for. However, for this movie, he brought in Motohiro Hata to record a new version. Shinkai met Hata on several occasions and noted a similarity between his passion as an artisan and that of the character Tako. Shinkai also felt that Hata's voice was perfect because to him it carried an underlying loneliness and sounded a little like an anxious young man. Those are quotes straight from him, and I hope they sounded more like a compliment in Japanese. This ensemble of audio and visual delights immerse me so deeply into the setting and story of this feature that I find myself almost feeling that tender, cool breeze. My hair standing on end and my sinuses being cleared by the petrichor of Skyfall. The final scene in particular, where the storm is crashing down on them, is incredibly immersive. All of this has to be purposeful projection, because Makoto himself has an endearing fascination with both this forecast and this foreground. After spending a decade living in Shinjuku, Makoto Shinkai became deeply attached to the quiet beauty hiding within this busy corner of Tokyo. He wanted others to feel that same sense of peace, to see the charm of the places he loved and maybe even be inspired to visit them someday. But after the 2011 earthquake and tsunami, that desire took on a new urgency. He worried that the scenery he cherished might not always be there, and so he set out to preserve it the best way he knew how, through animation. The result being The Garden of Words, an attempt to capture the city exactly as he'd come to see it, shimmering, fragile, and full of life. And I've been trying to plan a Japan trip with the boys ever since, but we all know how that goes. The world in this film is hyper-real, littered with objects that look like you could reach out and grab them, all contrasted against stylized anime characters. What's funny is that after years of watching anime, our eyes just come to accept this as normal. A world that looks almost real and faces that clearly belong to a drawing. Apart from avoiding slipping into the uncanny valley, Japanese animation has always embraced a more expressive, simplified style. They're not interested in rendering every wrinkle or blemish, and because he's foremost a fan of the medium as well as being part of it, Shinkai insists on keeping his characters hand-drawn. Now here's the part of the video where undoubtedly the retention drops a little bit, but it wouldn't be a Hashimoto video without a bit of thematic analysis. Rain is obviously more than just an aesthetic component in this film. It's a catalyst for both our characters to be pushed off the path of their everyday lives, to pause in that garden and sit with the things they can't control, their fears, their uncertainty, their loneliness. But rain also nurtures. It feeds, necessitates growth, slowly helping Tako and Yukino begin to heal. As quoted by Shinkai himself, rain more specifically represents love, a force that can't be stopped nor controlled. After their many meetings in the garden, Tako finds himself drawn to Yukino. Yukino, in her own pain, learns to accept the comfort he offers. It's less about romance and more about a connection, how they help each other learn to walk again. For Yukino, that means finding the courage to return to work after being broken down by her students. For Tako, it means discovering the value of a genuine bond that pushes him forward in his dream of crafting shoes. And when the storm finally breaks in that emotional finale, both of them in tears, finally honest with themselves, the clouds part just enough to let a beam of sunlight through. It feels like the world itself is congratulating them. They don't need the rain's help anymore. One of the most interesting choices Shinkai made was giving Tako a passion for shoemaking. He said he wanted the boy to have a craft that demanded real dedication, something that takes time, focus, and a kind of quiet maturity to master. He chose shoemaking because it's useful, it helps people walk, but it's also deeply intimate. You have to study someone's feet, touch them, understand how they move. It's a physical closeness that naturally creates a personal connection. During his research, Shinkai met real shoemakers to get a better idea of the occupation. This sparked an idea in his mind of feet carrying a quiet, sensual energy. The feet shot scenes are very much intentionally fetishist and erotic in their framing. Shinkai believed that they fit well within a story about a teenage boy and an older woman, even including an homage to Michelangelo's creation of Adam, to highlight the connection between creation and creator. Another proprietary theme is loneliness, but not necessarily in the melancholic way. What I really love about this film is how it treats loneliness. Shinkai describes this story as a love letter to the loners. This movie doesn't treat loneliness as something that must be fixed. It's such a refreshing way to look at solitude, not as a flaw or something to overcome, but as a state that can hold peace and self-understanding. Even though undoubtedly you could pick any number of themes from the Garden of Words, the reason I choose to bring up loneliness is because it's the one I can appreciate the most. Not to get too personal, but I've had a life of constant relocation and resettling, creating distance between me and my loved ones. I've had to cherish the time I do get to see them, and who's to guess, it might be the reason I'm more of an introvert, frankly. I of course deeply miss and care for those people in my life, but I've also become increasingly comfortable with my time alone. And in my maturity, it's not just become a comfortability, but a necessity, an unashamed part of my personality. I spend a lot of time alone, not because I dislike company, but because I genuinely enjoy my own. In moments of stress, whether it's work, school, or whatever, being by myself helps me reset and breathe. That's what I see in Tako and Yukino too. Both of them retreat to that garden when life becomes too heavy. Tako escaping the pressure of finding direction, and Yukino hiding from the pain of her workplace. It's via the appreciation of those tempest mornings they spend in their own company, eating chocolate, drinking beer, sketching designs where they heal. Yet it's that shared solitude, that mutual fondness for being alone that brings them together. They form a bond that reminds me of something simple but important. It's okay to cherish your own company, but it's just as crucial to let others in. And I'll end it here with this. If there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's that there's a clear distinction between being lonely and simply being alone. Shout out to all my loners, and shout out to you for watching this whole video. Here's a question for you. What anime's aesthetic is your favorite, and why? Let me know in the comments below. And if you could be so kind, check out some of my other videos. Drop a like, hit that subscribe button, and as always, appreciate you watching.